Hello, Tashidelik, and Happy New Year, everyone. So, my today's topic is on decoding self. Though Buddhism has mentioned about two types of self-identity of individuals and self-identity of phenomena. My topic focuses on self-identity of individuals. According to the Mahayana's teaching of two truths, relative truth and ultimate truth. Relative truth shows the existence of samsara, such as the cause of sufferings and suffering itself, while the ultimate truth includes the path to liberation and liberation itself. So the self-grasping becomes the cause of suffering, and eliminating this self-grasping becomes the path to liberation. But the problem is the two ways of teachings of Lord Buddha on self contradicts one another, and it confuses us. Because sometimes Lord Buddha would say, yourself is your own master. Who else could be? From which it clearly shows that self does exist and one has to apply self-will power and self-restraint in practice. Again, on the contrary, Buddha also said that all the states are selfless. Those who realized are free from suffering, from which Buddha clearly gives us the message that self does not exist at all. And this misconception of self-existence has to be abandoned in practice. So now let's decode these contradictory teachings on self. As exponent Chandra Kriti stated that relative truth is the means of liberation, which is why we can apply relative truth of samsara to achieve liberation. For example, by studying the nature of samsara, we can understand the nature of suffering and how to deal with it. Likewise, in positive manner, if we apply our self-esteem, our self-control, our self-willpower, in practice, it can lead us to a liberation. That's why Buddha taught us to apply our self-effort in practice. And that is the teaching of relative truth. But that is just the preliminary method. The main principal method is the practice that has the substance of emptiness, essence of emptiness in it. So that's why Buddha taught us to see the selflessness in self. And that is the teaching of ultimate truth. Okay, now let's identify what is the individual self-grasping is. Buddhism believes that individual self-grasping is a clinging to one's 5 aggregates as an individual. And the 5 aggregates are our physical form, our conception, feelings, consciousness, and formation. Self is an illusionary or imaginary identity of an individual. And the grasping is a mental event that creates this imagination of self and cling to it. So that's why grasping is the creator of self. Psychologist defines the self as an individual's perception of his or her abilities, personality, and other attributes. Hazel Marcus said that all the selves are culture specific and emerge as an individual's adaptation to cultural environments. Charles Cooley used the phrase looking glass self to emphasize that self is the product of social interaction. Okay, now how does this individual self-grasping arise? It arises by 2 ways: by co-emergence and by imputations. Co-emergent self-grasping is an inborn clinging of self-identity. The grasping we have since from the birth. For an example, newborn babies demand for mother's attention or milk. Buddhism believes that the inborn emotions and behaviors of newborn babies are co-emergent with the birth. As an individual's habitual pattern of past lives. And it is not taught by parents or a society. The inborn emotions such as preferences, attachment, joy, fear are the spontaneous self-grasping. This self-grasping emphasizes the baby to identify the physical body and feelings as oneself. And the baby identify that I'm hungry. I want mother's attention. I'm not comfortable in this diaper, and so on. British philosopher John Locke said that children are born in this world with a mind like blank slate, which is called tabula rasa in Latin. And his view contrasts from those of Plato and René Descartes, who asserts that some knowledge and ideas are inborn in humans, while the imputed self-grasping is an adopted clinging of self-identity by environmental influence. The imputed self-grasping is born from social thinking. Because we are social animals, that's why groups and other people would influence our mindset and our behaviors. Our social thinking revolves around how we present ourselves to others, to influence their perception of us, and how to change other people's behavior and attitude. Our mind is a part of society. And society is also made up of our mind, our belief, our action. Reactions, how we do and what we think. The society is the reflection of what is going on in our mind. So that's why the imputed self is not separate from society. And the psychologists, sociologists, and philosophers' definition of self is the description of imputed self-grasping, which is conditioned by society and significant others. So now, how can we get rid of this self-grasping? In the initial stage, we can manipulate, we can exploit, we can make use of this self-grasping by expanding it, embracing others in our self-circle by accepting others, caring, sharing, and understanding others can help us to expand the self-conception, which is only confined to oneself. So now the question is it possible to expand the self-conception? Yes, it is. For example, let's say there is this single woman, and whatever she thinks or does only revolve around her. Then she starts a family with her partner. Now her single lifestyle will change because she is no more single. And she must have to think about the presence of her family in her life. Now her self-conception will expand toward her family, and it will become our or us. Likewise, our school, our company, our country, our world are the imaginary identity of mass in-group people that is created by expanding ourselves. So that's why we can mitigate the self-grasping by expanding it toward others. But when it comes to the ultimate stage of practice, it is must to dismantle this self-grasping by deconstructing it part by part into emptiness or nothingness. Now the last question is, undoubtedly, we can say that grasping towards samsara would bind us. But what about the grasping towards liberation? Will it bind us? Yes, of course, it will, because grasping is always grasping, whether no matter it is toward samsara or liberation. For example, one's freedom to move will be snatched when one is fastened by a chain, regardless by whether a metal chain or gold chain. Similarly, grasping towards samsara and liberation both are attachment, which won't let us free ourselves. So that's why in the initial stage, we can make use of this self-grasping in our practice, such as by having expectations for the realization and motivation to practice the path, intention to achieve liberations, and so on. But when it comes to the ultimate stage of practice, all these positive incentives has to be handled with the practice of emptiness. For example, a wise traveler who simply enjoys the beauty in nature and place without ever intending to own it. And with that, I am going to conclude my talk here. And thank you so much for giving time, and have a wonderful day. Bye.